Welcome to a new chapter of Glioblastoma, aka GBM, presented by the Glioblastoma Research Organization. This season we're adopting a documentary-style format to offer you a never-before-seen look into the world of glioblastoma from around the globe. Join us as we venture into labs and companies worldwide, providing a comprehensive view of some of the cutting-edge efforts to combat GBM. Through intimate interviews and detailed on-site explorations, we'll offer an insider's perspective on the innovative strategies and real-time progress in the fight against glioblastoma. Thank you to our sponsors whose generous support has made this season possible. Please note that the sponsorship of this season does not constitute an endorsement of any sponsor's products or services. Remember, the information presented is for educational purposes only and it is not intended to treat, diagnose, or prevent any disease. Always consult your medical provider and healthcare team with any questions.
Okay, so I'm Frédéric Sottilini and I'm the CEO of Carthera. So the origin story of Carthera started from the idea of a French neurosurgeon, Professor Alexandre Carpentier. This neurosurgeon is treating patients, so he's operating them every day. And is facing the same type of challenge as other neurosurgeon and neuro-oncologists faces with glioblastoma, is that whatever you do, the disease always recur. And one of the reasons for that is the fact that there are some tumor cells that are spread over the brain and that cannot be reached by the therapeutic agent that are used to treat all the type of cancers. And the reason for that is the presence of a natural barrier in the brain that is called the blood-brain barrier that protects the brain, but at the same time it prevents molecules from penetrating into the brain tissue in sufficient concentration to be effective. And it is known since years that the use of ultrasound is a way to open temporarily this blood-brain barrier that is also called the BBB, and to let drug for a certain time window penetrate in much higher concentration in the brain. The issue that all the teams working with ultrasound had to face in the past is the fact that they were trying to pass ultrasound beams from outside of the skull. And the problem is that when you try to cross the skull with ultrasound, most of them are reflected or diffracted. So it's very, very complicated to reach exactly the type of beam that you need to open the BBB. And the fantastic idea from this French neurosurgeon, Professor Alexandre Carpentier, is the fact that because he was opening he was opening actually skulls every day to do surgery, to do biopsy. He came and met with engineers and researchers and asked them if they could develop a product that will be implanted in the brain for the ultrasound beam not to cross actually the skull and to be in direct contact with the brain tissue. And that's, what has been done with the SonoCloud. That was the origin of the development of this device, and that's where all started more than 10 years ago. So here's the SonoCloud device. This is an implant. Here what you can see is a mesh that is used to do bone reconstruction. So the way it is positioned in the skull is that when you have a patient with a brain tumor, the neurosurgeon is opening the skull, is doing a bone flap, is taking the bone out, he is doing his surgery. So doing his surgery is removing the brain tumor. And at the end of the procedure, what the neurosurgeon does is that he places the device, the implant, in the thickness of the skull. He fixes the implant with screws. It is covered with the skin, so the device is totally invisible. The patient cannot feel it. And what you see here is a connection chamber. This connection chamber is used for a transdermal needle to come and connect the device to an external generator. This external generator provides power to the ultrasound emitters that you see here. So you have 9 emitters. Each emitter emits an ultrasound beam that can create the cavitation of the microbubble and the opening of the BBB. So when you have a glioblastoma, the first thing that has to be done is a surgical resection of the tumor. So in order to do that, the neurosurgeon does a bone flap. He removes the bone. He does his surgery. At the end of the procedure, the SonoCloud implant is positioned and replaces the bone flap. And it is covered with the skin, so it is totally invisible. The patient cannot feel it, and it can be activated on purpose. This is the SonoCloud implant. So this mesh is fixed on the skull. It is covered with the skin. And when activated, you can emit ultrasound. So the ultrasound emissions is done from the 9 emitters that you see here. And in order to open the BBB, you need to have an effect on the tight junction between the endothelial cells of the blood vessels. And the way we are having this effect on the endothelial cells is that we're injecting microbubbles in the bloodstream. So intravenously, we're injecting these microbubbles, and the ultrasound beams will create what is called cavitation of these microbubbles. So the microbubbles will start expanding and contracting, and this movement of the microbubbles will create a stress on the endothelial cells of the blood vessels and will have an effect on the tight junctions that will open a needle for a few minutes. And this is the fact that these tight junctions are open that let molecules pass from the bloodstream to the brain tissue. This type of approach is a real breakthrough for glioblastoma because until now that was almost impossible for molecules to penetrate into the brain tissue. When you had in the past molecules that were injected in the bloodstream, they were trapped into the vasculature without the possibility to pass or in very, very small concentration into the brain. Here with the SonoCloud, and because of the opening of this BBB, for the first time, the therapeutic molecules have the possibility actually to reach the brain tissue and the target in very high concentration. Getting drugs past the blood-brain barrier is one of the last barriers in the modern medicine. It has been an incredible hurdle for neuro-oncologists and for neurologists in general to offer to the patients proper treatments to the pathologies that are affecting brain. The brain is protected by this natural barrier, this blood-brain barrier, and there is no way to let molecules penetrate in a high concentration. With the SonoCloud, the neuro-oncologist and the neurologist have a fantastic tool to let molecules pass in high concentration during a limited period of time. And this is a way to offer new perspective for patients suffering from very severe brain disease like a tumor, brain tumor and glioblastoma, but also with neurodegenerative diseases. The problem is exactly the same. This blood-brain barrier prevents molecules from penetrating, and SonoCloud is a fantastic tool to let very promising agents penetrate into the tissue and offer a new perspective for the patients. What's very inspiring in Carthera's journey is that it really started with a huge unmet need. The presence of these blood-brain barriers that prevent molecules from penetrating into the tissue is something that is blocking the development of promising drugs since decades. And with Carthera, we had the possibility to start from the idea of Professor Alexandre Carpentier and to build the device that will respond to his vision of the treatment. We developed this device through the different steps of development. From the preclinical stage where we've tested our device on different animal models. When it was considered as being safe enough to be transferred to the patients, we started the first clinical trials, and then we went through the different phases of standard development. So phase 1 for the safety, and we're now on phase 3 to confirm, the efficacy of our approach. And what was really amazing throughout this journey is that the results we got with animals were reproduced with humans. We saw with animals that we were capable of opening the BBB and let drug penetrate in a certain concentration. We saw the same increase in concentration in human brain, and we saw the same effects when we increase the concentration of the therapeutic molecule. We control in a much more efficient way the progression of the tumor, and when we control the progression of the tumor, we have an effect on certain patients on the survival. So we are in medicine here, and in medicine, not all the patients are reacting the same way to treatment. So there are good responders. There are patients who are responding less to a certain type of treatment. But it's very encouraging when we see some of our patients with an extended life expectancy. When you think about modern medicine, you think about collaboration between different hospitals, collaboration between different physicians, coming from different specialties, collaboration with engineers. And that's really what was so important and so unique with Carthera, is that Carthera was born from the collaboration from ultrasound experts. So we're talking about researchers here. We're talking about engineers capable of transforming ideas into actual devices. And we're talking about collaboration with physicians from all over the world. And it is very important to have all these physicians collaborating together with our specialists, because that's the only way at the end to make sure that what we've developed actually respond to the need of these physicians. I would say that in the next 5 to 10 years, I see the life expectancy of glioblastoma being multiplied by 2. And this will be done with the SonoCloud. The SonoCloud will help extending life of glioblastoma patients substantially in the coming years. And if we see even longer, if we think about what will be the position of Carthera in the therapeutic armament, I think that Carthera and the SonoCloud will be used for the treatment of all kinds of severe brain diseases, not only to treat brain tumors, but also to treat neurodegenerative diseases. So I would say that my ambition for Carthera is to double the life expectancy of glioblastoma patients in the next 5 to 10 years, and to be a treatment standard for all severe brain disease in the coming 10 to 20 years. It all starts from medical unmet need and from the desire to find a solution for patients suffering from a very severe disease. So all what has been developed in order to bring solution to these patients. And we're not telling the patients that we have the solution that works for everyone and that works every time. We're telling the patients that we have a solution that has the potential to transform the treatment of glioblastoma, and that we need to go through different evaluation. And the clinical evaluation of our products cannot be done without the patients. So the patients are really playing a critical role in the clinical development. They are part of this development. They participate to our studies, and at the end, they help validating our approach. They participate also to the creation of a new standard of care. And this cannot be done without the caregivers. Caregivers are playing a critical role in the Sonobird trial and in all type of clinical studies. They are the one who are really in contact with the patients. They are at the interface between the therapeutic solution and the patient, and they are the one responsible for the quality of the treatment. So we as a company pay a special attention to the training of these caregivers, of these physicians, of the nurses who are doing the treatment. We want them to be as trained as possible. We want them to master really the treatment in order to give the best chance for success of the treatment to the patients. We all know that the progress in medicine are done step by step, and this is especially true in oncology treatments. You start a new treatment, you gain some additional months of life for the patient, you improve the quality of life for the patients, and every year, every decade, there are progresses that are made, and life expectancy gets higher, and the quality of life of the patient is improving. It is incredibly motivating to see ideas becoming reality. We started developing SonoCloud more than 10 years ago we went through the different development stage. We created a prototype. We've tested this prototype with animals. We started clinical trials. We saw patients who were in very bad condition. Some of them benefited from the treatment we've proposed, and this is extremely motivating. It's extremely motivating to be part of such a journey, to see, the progresses we've made within 15 years, to see how an idea can be transformed into a tool that is beneficial for the patient. This is really what drives me and what makes me pleased to go at work every day.
So I'm Dr. Michael Vogelbaum. I am program leader of neuro-oncology and chief of neurosurgery at the Moffitt Cancer Center in Tampa, Florida. There's a lot of misunderstanding about the blood-brain barrier in the setting of a brain tumor. A lot of people recognize that when we give an IV contrast agent for imaging, MRI or CT, the tumor lights up with contrast, so the blood-brain barrier must be open, right? As it turns out, it's not completely open, and it's not open for all of the tumor. It's open only for a certain part of the tumor, the part that lights up with contrast, but that's the part that we remove surgically. The part that is the real problem when it comes to giving radiation therapy and chemotherapy is the part that is behind a normal blood-brain barrier, what we call the infiltrative tumor or the non-contrast enhancing tumor. That's what we're trying to treat medically, and that's where the drugs can't get to at all. So we have to get past that blood-brain barrier if we're going to have effective treatments for glioblastoma. So the way that this trial runs is that we start with patients who have a recurrent GBM, a tumor mass that we can see on MRI, and one that is amenable to being removed surgically. We go ahead and remove that mass, but then, of course, what's left behind is that infiltrative tumor, the part that we call non-contrast enhancing tumor. And so to treat that, once we're done removing the tumor and closing up the lining of the brain, we go ahead and put in the SonoCloud device, which is an array of 9 ultrasound transmitters, and that replaces the window of bone that we opened in order to get access to the brain. So that's left in place, and then we just close the scalp as we normally do, and then we can come back and access that device through a single port that's right under the scalp. So the question is, how effective is carboplatin going to be once it actually can reach tumor cells in the brain? And that's really the point of this trial. So just to recap, an earlier trial was done using the same technology where a sample of tumor was taken before the blood-brain barrier disruption and after carboplatin had been given. And then the disruption was allowed to occur. And then a second sample of tumor was taken, and the investigators were able to compare the second sample to the first one, and they found that the drug got into the infiltrating tumor much more effectively than it had before. So the SonoCloud technology was able to open up the blood-brain barrier and allow enough drug to get in that it was obviously measurable. But getting drug in is a great accomplishment, but the real question is it enough drug to actually get a clinical response? In this case, we want to see that there's enough control of the tumor that the patient lives longer. And that's really the question that is being addressed in this clinical trial. So the current clinical trial is asking the all-important question of whether or not this treatment approach helps people live longer. That's really why it's a pivotal trial. It's designed so that the company can go to the FDA with the results, and if they're positive, if it shows that this treatment improve survival over the conventional treatment that we use now, then there's a good chance that it would be approved by the FDA for use routinely in this country. So we're always asked who is eligible to be on a clinical trial. And there's some general points, and then there are ones that are specific to this trial. In this trial, the patients need to have a recurrent glioblastoma. That is one that's already undergone some form of surgery for diagnosis, has undergone radiation therapy and treatment with Temodar, which is the standard therapy, and then MRI evidence that it's regrown. In general, the patients also have to be healthy enough to undergo additional treatment, to undergo surgery. They have to be willing to come to the hospital for multiple visits, both for evaluation and also for treatment on the clinical trial. A few other details include the location of the tumor, whether or not it's in a location where we can actually place the array so that the infiltrative tumor can be effectively treated, and also that the tumor has to be 5 centimeters or less in size. Those are the major criteria for this trial. Well, how is this going to fit into the standard of care for GBM if it's a positive trial? Well, I don't think that's going to be a very hard question to answer. We really don't have much to offer patients, especially in the setting of recurrent GBM, where we're using drugs that have been in use for decades and really haven't had much new that's been effective. I do see that this will also be used in the newly diagnosed setting, although how it's used is not entirely clear yet. I think that there are more things that we'd have to do to really understand how do we add carboplatin to the current standard treatment. One of the challenges is we have a standard treatment in the newly diagnosed setting that has been shown to extend survival. And so replacing that with something else can be a little perilous unless it's done in the setting of a clinical trial. So in general, we prefer not to just do something different from what's been shown to be effective. And in fact, I think this would likely lead to another clinical trial comparing the current standard approach to this new approach, but that remains to be seen. I think that anything that is able to improve drug penetration in the brain really needs to be investigated in any other setting where drug delivery is important for treating both other types of brain tumors, but also non-neoplastic conditions. It's a very important technology. Once validated, I think that we need to really do a lot more to see how far this technology can be taken to treat what are currently incurable diseases. So in terms of changing clinical practice in the next year, we have to do this trial. Hopefully it's going to be complete its accrual in the next year so we can start to get a sense of whether or not it's working. We have to finish enrolling patients on the trial, treating them, and then we have to wait to see what the outcomes are. And if the outcomes are significantly better than with standard therapy, then we'll have our answer. So right now, the only thing we can really control is how quickly we get patients on the trial. And that's what we hope to have accomplished in the next year. So how do we decide when to bring a trial to our center? That's a great question because we're always looking at a number of different new drugs, new technologies, new approaches to treat this incurable cancer. In this specific situation, this is a technology I've known about for a long time, since its inception, because I used to run international conferences focused on this question of how do we get drugs into the brain more effectively. So we started these conferences focused on delivering drugs directly into the brain. But in the course of holding a number of these symposia, I learned about this new approach when we had Dr. Carpentier, who invented it, come and speak at one of our conferences, and then we had him back at several more. So I heard about this a long time ago. I saw it when it was in its infancy. And I knew that once it reached the point where it could be developed commercially and lead up to a potential pivotal trial, that I wanted to be part of it. So I've been on the lookout for this approach, and once it reached that maturity, we wanted to be part of trying to bring it to patients.
I am Alexandre Carpentier. I am a neurosurgeon at Pitié-Salpêtrière Hospital, Sorbonne University. I'm the head of the department here, and I'm having also a research laboratory in which I do preclinical studies. And this laboratory conducted actually 10 years ago some preclinical study about blood-brain barrier opening, and now it has been incorporated inside Carthera, who is a startup company from the university, from Sorbonne University, that I founded in 2011, and which is now in phase 3 worldwide. The origin of Carthera, or the origin of the idea, came to me in 2010, when I was actually invited to the first meeting of Ultrasound Society, International Therapeutic Ultrasound Society. And I was invited not because I was working on ultrasound, I was invited because I did all the development of LITT, which is laser interstitial thermal therapy. And they wanted to have my experience on laser thermal ablation under MRI guidance. And now this technique is is feasible in all over the places, all over the neurosurgery department. And coming back from this meeting, I had the idea of the SonoCloud, actually, to use ultrasound. I stayed to this meeting and I learned about ultrasound. And coming back from, it was in Aix-en-Provence, coming back from Aix-en-Provence to Paris in the train, I had the idea actually of conceiving the SonoCloud, taking advantage of erasing the burden of the skull, because as you know, the skull is absorbing all ultrasound emissions, so it's getting much more simpler if you get rid of the bone. So if you implant the ultrasound emitters inside the bone, taking advantage of the surgical procedure, of course. One of the big problems in neuro-oncology is the blood-brain barrier. The brain is a very specific organ in which all the vessels are thicker, twice or third time thicker than the vessels in the rest of the body. And this protects us from toxins or proteins that we don't want to get into the brain. So it protects the brain from different toxic agents. So it's very helpful. It's a need in common life. The problem is when you have a brain tumor and you want to give chemotherapy, for example, the chemotherapy don't go that much in the brain. Only 2 drugs, temozolomide and CCNU, can get into the brain at 20%. But if you take carboplatin, if you take others, if you take antibody, it's far less than 1%. So if you put 100% of a drug in the carotid, for example, concentration in the carotid, only 1% of it is going to get into the brain. And this is due to the thickness of those vessels, and we call it blood-brain barrier. This for normal brain. For tumors, there is a blood-tumor barrier, but most of the time we resect all the tumors, so we have normal surrounding brain, but the tumor is going to recur at this place. So we need to, if we want to address chemotherapy inside the brain correctly, we have to open the blood-brain barrier, the normal blood-brain barrier, around the surgical field of resection, actually. And thanks to the ultrasound and to the SonoCloud, chemotherapy can get into the brain 5 or 10 times higher than normally for the same intravenous dose. And if you give checkpoint inhibitors, antibody, or other big drugs, because more and more the chemotherapy, the targeted drugs are getting bigger and bigger because they have a receptor, and the SonoCloud then can let them get in And what is very fantastic, it's not only that the SonoCloud opens the blood-brain barrier and the drug can get in, but the blood-brain barrier is closing itself by between 2 and 6 hours afterwards. So that the drug, if it is sufficiently enough, big enough, it won't be put outside of the brain by the system. It can't be stuck inside the brain. So we are more and more talking about drug penetration, but also about drug remanence, which is the time during the period of time during when the drug can stay in the brain. And this is very important because actually the brain is very smart. And this blood barrier is very smart. If it is normal without ultrasound, if by mistake a drug can get into the brain, an undesired drug or an undesired toxin, in 20 minutes the drug is going to be put outside by the blood-brain barrier, which is so-called the efflux pump. And thanks to the ultrasound and the SonoCloud, the efflux pump don't work for 48 hours. And if you can get a high-weight molecular drug, which is big, it's not going to be a candidate for the efflux pump. So the drug is going to be stuck inside the brain. And that's what we see when we inject antibodies during sonication. Thanks to sonication, ultrasound emission, thanks to this, the antibody can get into the brain and it is stuck in here for 15 days. So the SonoCloud worked. It's an ultrasound emitter, and the ultrasound are emitted in the brain, and during the same time, microbubbles are injected inside the bloodstream. Microbubbles that are actually usually used in diagnostic echography for cardio, for example. But when we use it for brain and with a specific wavelengths of ultrasound emission, we can make them vibrate and get into a resonance phenomenon so that they vibrate and then they distort the vessel, squeeze them, dilate them, squeeze them, and this leads to a blood-brain barrier opening without any damaging of the vessel. If you are able to master exactly the acoustic pressure. So microbubble intravenously, ultrasound in the brain, and then ultrasound are interfering with the microbubble, and the microbubble are doing the blood-brain barrier opening. At the very beginning, we thought it could be toxic because it's not natural, of course, and additionally, a lot of proteins can get into the brain. We found it actually that it was not only non-toxic because the blood-brain barrier closes itself about 6 hours after, but additionally, all the proteins, mostly albumin, that gets into the brain actually stimulate the local cells, microglial cells, and make them more efficient. In all the development of Carthera, or this concept, it's not the development of a company, it's the development of a therapeutic. What inspired me the most is, of course, the life length of the patients, of course, because this is the goal, this is my goal. Maybe if I can bring a bricks to this, but I'm convinced that playing with blood-brain barrier opening, modulating blood-brain barrier opening is going to be a key problem in the future, and it's going to be a key solution, in the future. So the most exciting, it's as you can imagine, it's a whole burden from 15 years now. It's a huge amount of work. It's just a very nice period, bad period, very nice period. What is very satisfactory is to see, and this is what inspired me the most, is to see other clinicians and other surgeons finding that the idea is great, finding that the need is real, finding that the SonoCloud may be a good solution, maybe the good solution. And this gives me a lot of satisfaction, actually, because we are, at the beginning when I started, it's an implanted device. So there is always the criticism of, but we need to implant it. But it is such simpler when the system is implanted than when the system is from the outside. This is much simpler in terms of time, in terms of medical consuming, in terms of patients, because you can do ultrasound without MRI. So you don't need a patient to be in the MRI for 2-3 hours. And you can repeat it every three weeks or every 15 days because it's very simple. A nurse can do it and the patient don't feel anything during the sonication. So all this is great because when I did the first primate study, it was under general anesthesia, so I couldn't know if the primate was feeling anything. And so it was a succession of green lights, actually, which was very satisfactory. The international dimension of an innovation is a key for success. Actually, it has been built in Paris, of course, and afterwards we had centers in Europe, and now we have centers in the States. Since the very beginning, I thank Roger Stub, who just believed a lot in this technology, with Mitch Berger also, who are very attracted for this technology. And I must say that we're not going faster in the States than in France or in Europe, but in the States, entrepreneurship is a dynamic that we don't have, and mentality are thinking outside the box. So we can use the SonoCloud with another drug, have ideas, and do them, and not speak about ideas, but do them. And at the very beginning, I think it's a huge impact and huge positive stuff that being international, actually. SonoCloud and standard of care. Yes, it's a hope, of course. It can be SonoCloud plus carboplatin, but it could be also SonoCloud with other drugs. And more and more, standard of care is going to be something that is difficult to apprehend because most of the tumor, now we have genetic specificity, and it's going to be the chemotherapy that we're going to use, or antibodies, or targeted treatment are going to be very specific from one patient to another. And thanks to the SonoCloud, all those medication are going to be able to reach the blood-brain barrier. So so standard of care maybe, but it's a tool. It's not the biological effect of the SonoCloud. The SonoCloud is just here as a tool to help neuro-oncologists to get their drug in better and to try drugs that would have never been able to work in the brain. The role of the patients and caregivers are major in a development like this because it's an additional step. It's not a step that replaces other steps. It's an additional step that doesn't take that much time, but it's a step for which the patient has to understand exactly what we're doing. And the caregiver also have a new tool so that they have to be part of the process, of course. For patients, we explain them exactly what the device is, the fact that the needle cannot get into the brain, that ultrasounds stay outside the dura mater, that it's totally inert and stuff like this. If you explain them nicely, it's absolutely no problem. For example, in all the clinical trial, it is stipulated that at the end of the trial, if the patient recurs, we remove the SonoCloud device. But actually, all of the patients say, no, it doesn't disturb me. I don't want an additional surgery just for this. I don't need it. It doesn't bother me. So we are always, of course, very attentive to what the patients are saying because we're here for them, actually. Concerning the caregivers, it's an opportunity for the nurses because the nurses are doing the blood-brain barrier opening. It's an opportunity for her to have something more practical with the patient for the neuro-oncology nurses. So it gives also more importance to their role, which is great. For patients that are in the SonoBird trial or in the phase 2 trial, it is very important for them to understand that they participate to a development of a brand new technology, which is very essential for us and for them, because it is the first time that we have a system, easy to use, that can increase the drug concentration in the brain, so increase the efficacy of what we give them. So if ever this trial it doesn't work, we don't know. It should, because phase 2 worked. But anyway, it's not going to be lost, because in the future we're going to associate the SonoCloud with other drugs, with vaccine, with immunotherapy, with other drug and chemotherapy, targeted therapy, so that all what we do now is are very important step for the future and for the help of themselves and other patients. What drives me personally in this mission? The goal of helping the patients, putting my name in the story of glioblastoma efforts, bringing a stone to the edifice of therapeutic, and it's far enough. It's a lot already. If I can do all this with Carthera, it's going to be definitely great. The international dimension is also very sympathetic, but the most important are towards the patient, of course. The recent development of the SonoCloud is actually the SonoBird study, which is a phase 3, randomized phase 3. So we're gonna know exactly if it's gonna be positive, if we can be reimbursed, and if patients will be able to take advantage of this technology and can have it all over the world. The goal is actually to start with such a medication, SonoCloud plus carboplatin, and if ever the patient has a recurrence, switch to another drug, but still use the SonoCloud system. And actually, if it is implanted in a patient in the carboplatin association, it can be used afterwards, off-label by the clinician to optimize the other chemotherapy substances. So this is, I think, the future. We have phase 2 to prove this, of course, but every center will be able, if we have reimbursement, every center will be able to do their own phase 2 afterwards, selecting their own drug, the drug that it trusts the most. And like this, we're going to have a cartography of all what could be done and what can be done and what is best.
My name is Ahmed Idbey. I'm a neuro-oncologist in Paris, in Pitié-Salpêtrière Hospital. I'm teaching neurology at Sorbonne University, and I'm a researcher at the Brain Institute of Paris. So one day, Alexandre Carpentier came to see us, telling us that I have something to open the blood-brain barrier, and it's a big limitation in our field. And we have started to discuss and think and brainstorm about the compound to combine with SonoCloud. I think that's the beginning, and I remember a meeting with our colleagues in New York at the very beginning of the story. The most inspiring me in Carthera is the flexibility of the team. It's very easy to discuss and to exchange with all the members of the team, from the technician to the physician to the engineer, and it's very pleasant to have feedbacks and to have the ability to exchange quickly our thoughts about the development and the device. Glioblastoma is a rare disease, a very complex disease, and obviously we have to collaborate all together, the physician, the patient, the industry, to make a significant breakthrough. And the collaboration shouldn't be limited to a group or to a country, but should be international-wide to ensure prompt progress in the field. Yeah, as you know, a phase 3 clinical trial is currently ongoing, testing the anti-tumor efficacy of the SonoCloud device combined with carboplatin chemotherapy in recurrent glioblastoma patients eligible for surgery. So we hope in the upcoming years, this strategy, SonoCloud plus carboplatin, will become, based on this clinical trial, the standard of care in this population of glioblastoma, and it will be tested in other situations and for other patients. I mean, in first-line setting, for example. Physicians in routine practice, but also in clinical research, do not work alone anymore. They are collaborating with the patient, the caregivers, the industry, and we take into account all the feedback of the patients to improve our medical management of the other patients and to improve the development of the device, to optimize the pathway of the patient in the clinics, to optimize the supportive care in patients treated with the device, how to reduce the pain, for instance, and other symptoms. So the patient and the caregivers play a critical role in the optimization of the care pathway. Yes, first of all, I would like to thank all the patients participating to all clinical trials in neuro-oncology and more specifically in SonoBird. And the patients participating to a clinical trial make research moving forward first, but they can also take advantage of this innovative therapeutic strategy that will be potentially the standard of care for tomorrow. So again, I would like to thank the patients for their contribution to the research, hoping they will benefit from these innovative strategies. As I mentioned earlier, clinical trial is a very long process because we have to enroll patients in the trial, and if the patients accept to participate to the trial, and the more there are, the quicker the clinical trial will be, and the quicker we'll have the answer for a specific therapeutic strategy, including SonoBird, and quicker it will be available in routine for patients if the clinical trial is positive.